This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And here I am once again. I am, of course, Josh Strickland. Here I am once again. I am at work at 5 o'clock in the morning here in the good old news studio, the local news station that I work at. And we have a show for you today. We are nearing today. We're getting there. We passed the 2-week mark. And there's no good news on the horizon from what I can tell for the future of sports and sporting events happening anytime soon. So that is unfortunately what I have to tell you today. We're going to be talking, so this first segment's going to be just a little discussion about the coronavirus and its effects on sports and how it's kind of going a little bit more than we thought it would. Then we'll talk about NFL player discipline, how the new CBA affects player discipline. We'll talk about the MLB CBA because we can't get enough of CBAs. We'll talk about the pressure to get sports back on TV, which that includes the NBA and MLB and NHL currently. And we'll talk about D1, the Division I vote for seniors and should they get eligibility back because of a lost year. Then our random sport of the day, which is Kabaddi, one of the two. We'll discuss that at the end of the show. So let's start off. Obviously, this coronavirus thing has been going on for more than just over 2 weeks now. 2 weeks ago, Rudy Gobert tested positive. The NBA shut everything down. Then the NHL shut everything down. And then the MLB was like, okay, we're going to postpone opening day, which opening day was supposed to be this past week. And unfortunately, it was not. So the MLB, they postponed opening day for 2 weeks. They're probably going to postpone it for a little longer than that. And a lot of sports leagues were saying, hey, we might just need to. Originally, they were like, we might just need to do it to empty crowds. Now they're just like, we're not going to do them at all. It's an issue for everyone involved. Now, everyone assumed that this would kind of blow over by the time summer rolls around. I know some people have said that heat is going to help. It's going to help get rid of the virus. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a scientist. I am not an expert on the matter. But so that's what people believe. People believe once summer, the temperatures rise, which, by the way, the temperatures have risen where I am. It was 85 degrees today. It was 85 degrees today. And so the temperatures have already risen, and summer is coming upon us, especially here in the South, where it will be 100 degrees without humidity. And then you add on humidity, and then it's just dreadful. But there is talk now. Here we go. We're at the end of March. It's March 29th. We are at the end of March, about to start April. There are talks now that football could possibly get canceled. Now, I just like to remind everybody, football does not start until August. That is just a fact. August/September, usually late August, early September. So, doing some quick maths, it's about 6 months away. More like 5. It's about 5 months away until football season and until college football starts. They all start usually meeting around late July to start training camp, and in NFL they do the same, and August is usually for fall practice and training camp and stuff like that. So we're still quite a ways away from that, but I've seen a lot of people, Kirk Herbstreit has mentioned that we might need to cancel football season. It's looking that way right now. I've seen other journalists and other personalities mention that it's definitely a possibility. They've been in talks about it to decide what to do. And in my humble opinion, I feel like it's just a tad too early to make an official call on football. Now, I understand the coronavirus is a big issue right now, and it's getting worse and worse, but we're getting better testing practices as I've read. I know there's a test now that gets you results within 15 minutes, which is going to help immensely with making sure people are not going to places infected and infecting other people. So that's going to be helpful. So we are working on fighting this. We have social distancing. We got self-quarantine. My quarantine beard is coming along fantastically, in case you were wondering. We're doing as much as we can. Well, some people could do more, but most of this country, I feel like, are doing as much as they can to kind of help combat this coronavirus. And that's mostly because, I'm a little selfish here, but it's mostly because I want sports back. Because, nothing. I was talking to my dad earlier today, and he was just like, I hate this. There's no sports on. This is literally hell. I'm in hell right now, and I kind of agree. Now, sports is not my only thing. Sports is a huge part of my life, of course. I wouldn't be doing the show if it wasn't. But sports is not my only hobby. I play video games. I work on computers. I look at technology. I look at marketing stuff, and social media trends and stuff like that. That stuff interests me. And video content creation just in general, that stuff interests me. So during this quarantine, I've kind of used it as a time to kind of get better and improve at some things that I needed to improve in. But unfortunately, some people, they legit, something they look forward to every day is just to watch sports. I'm not saying it's their only hobby, but it's something that you kind of look forward to. Now, I live in the southern United States, so getting rid of football is kind of the doomsday scenario here. If you get rid of football, cancel football season, then what are we going to do in the fall? What are we going to do in late August when it's 110 degrees without humidity, and then you add on humidity? What are we going to do in August when we can't pack into a stadium with 85,000 people, 85,000 of our closest friends, in this terrible humidity directly in the sun, watching our team destroy a FCS football team or a group of 5 team or just a lesser team in general? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So there have been suggestions. There's a suggestion floating out there that college football could start in June. They can play in June, and this is all based off the fact that they're hoping that because of the higher temperatures, then the virus will kind of get killed off with higher temperatures, but they're scared that it's going to come back in the winter, so they're thinking of doing a shortened season in the summer, and then no playoff, I guess have a national championship game, maybe, but kind of a shortened season in the summer. Just have it June, July, August, and then have the national championship game sometime after that. This is, of course, mainly because of TV money, which we'll discuss that later on the show. I got a whole segment specifically about TV money and sports and how all of this is being affected. That's going to be later on the show. But that is an option that has been floated out there. That is what people are mentioning could happen, could be a thing that could happen. Then what about the NFL? The NFL, I don't know what the NFL are going to do. The NFL has not really made any announcements. The NFL is kind of worried about the NFL draft at the moment. The NFL draft is going on as planned, even though they've been told that it might not be the best idea to go on as planned, but it is going on as planned. Whether it be a studio show or whether it have all the theatrics as they wanted in Las Vegas, that show is going as planned. So we don't really know what the NFL is going to plan on doing. I can definitely see the NFL just kind of waiting and seeing what happens here. But like I said, I feel like it's a little too early to kind of cancel football. Some people are trying to cancel football right here and right now. And then you get into the fact that what about the seniors or the juniors that were going to jump ship after this season? Would they come back? We discussed this. We discussed this in the last show. What team would benefit the most from a year without football? And I mean, LSU probably would. But what about Clemson? You have Trevor Lawrence. You got Travis Etienne coming back. What are they going to do? Because more than likely, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number one pick in the draft, whether they play football or not. I don't know how the NFL draft next year would work if there's no football. I don't know who decides who gets the first round pick, the number one pick, but more than likely Trevor Lawrence is the number one pick, and he's leaving. He's out. Travis Etienne, he already passed up 1 year. He's probably going to leave next year as well, whether or not they play football. So you have these teams that, these teams that are built off of senior talent. They're built off older people. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're losing kind of a potential championship year because of this. Will scholarships be coming back, which we're discussing that later on the show as well. It's just kind of mind-boggling to me that we are trying to cancel football this early on. I understand that this is a terrible virus and it's just getting worse and worse every day according to everybody pretty much. But I feel like it's just a tad too early to cancel the biggest sport in the country, especially since the biggest sport in the country doesn't start for another 6 months. So when we come back, we'll discuss the NFL player discipline, the new CBA, what kind of discipline measures are they doing? I know there's rumors that they're going to change. We'll discuss that when we come back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, the NFL passed a new CBA, in case you didn't know. I mean, I've talked about it because it was one of the only things to talk about in sports here in the past 2 weeks, of course. And part of the new CBA, part of the negotiations for the new CBA is how they were going to handle discipline in the NFL. There has been many other cases between 2015 and 2017. The NFL Players Association, the union, was on the losing end of a string of federal court rulings in cases involving Tom Brady with the Deflategate, Adrian Peterson with his whole thing with his kid, Ezekiel Elliott with his legal issues as well. These disciplinary actions during these cases were all brought by the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell. He kind of is the judge, jury, and executioner in the NFL, and a lot of people were not okay with that because they seem like he kind of overuses power. The main example is Deflategate with Tom Brady getting suspended for 4 games for not cooperating, destroying his cell phone, or getting someone to destroy his cell phone, something like that. I don't quite remember exactly what happened there. But some people have been saying that the NFL commissioner, is kind of overstretching his powers and kind of abusing them, especially when it comes to players that don't cooperate or stuff like that. So I remember when the CBAs the negotiations were going, I remember one big thing was that for disciplinary actions, they wanted a third party to handle that instead of the NFL commissioner. So, I mean, like I mentioned, the Tom Brady, Adrian Peterson, Ezekiel Elliott, all those cases reaffirmed the NFL commissioner's broad disciplinary authority under Article 46 of the CBA, and it made it decidedly more difficult for players to successfully challenge the commissioner's disciplinary decisions in court. In each of these high-profile cases, the federal courts upheld lengthy suspensions imposed by Commissioner Roger Goodell for conduct which he deemed to be detrimental to the game, in the case of Tom Brady, or the violation of the league's personal conduct policy in the cases of Adrian Peterson and Ezekiel Elliott. Despite serious questions being raised as to the fairness of the league investigation and disciplinary proceedings, the NFLPA leadership vowed to seek changes to the commissioner's disciplinary authority. However, the new CBA, which was narrowly approved by the players last week, reveals that the commissioner's disciplinary authority remains largely unchanged, and the rules for resolving the player discipline cases remain heavily stacked in the league's favor. So something went wrong in the CBA negotiations, but the commissioner still has final say on Article 46 discipline. Under the 2011 CBA, the commissioner could both determine the initial discipline against the player and then review the correctness of his own decision on appeal. That precise scenario played out in Deflategate, although the commissioner could appoint a designee to serve as the hearing officer. There was no requirement that he do so. And even when the commissioner appointed another person to serve as hearing officer, it was usually someone with deep ties to the league, like Harold Henderson, the former longtime league executive who presided over 90 appeals. During the Ezekiel Elliott case, the NFLPA noted in court papers that Henderson had never once before completely vacated discipline imposed by the commissioner. So in the new CBA, this regime remains unchanged. For conduct detrimental cases, conduct detrimental is undefined in the CBA and has been applied by the commissioner to on-field and off-the-field conduct. The commissioner will continue to serve as both disciplinarian and appellate judge. The area where the commissioner's role will be reduced is in the determination of discipline under the personal conduct policy. For those disciplinary cases, the commissioner will no longer make the initial determination of whether discipline is warranted. Instead, fines or suspensions under the personal conduct policy will be initially determined by a disciplinary officer jointly selected by the parties. The officer will be the same for all cases and serve a minimum of term of 2 years unless discharged by either party upon 120 days notice. This could turn into a revolving door scenario whenever either side perceives that the disciplinary officer is partial to one party. But don't confuse this arbitrator with the final arbitrator, in quotations. This person will only make the initial determination of discipline. Final determinations will continue to remain within the sole province of the commissioner, Roger Goodell, who will hear all appeals of disciplinary decisions made by the disciplinary officer. This is in contrast to the arbitration system employed by other professional sports leagues, which utilize an impartial arbitrator to decide appeals of the initial disciplinary decisions. In the NFL, final decisions are being made by a partial decision maker, the commissioner. So, there have been some changes, so now you kind of have a middleman there, but at the end of the day, Roger Goodell still makes all the decisions, all the disciplinary decisions when it comes to cases that are detrimental to the league or detrimental to league conduct, which is kind of broad, and they didn't really mention any of that in the CBA. They didn't mention what constitutes detrimental conduct to the league. They didn't mention any of that stuff. So it's very confusing. It's very kind of convoluted, and it's kind of built to make the commissioner still kind of in power, but give the sense that he gave up some power. Grounds for appealing limited to challenging length of suspension. Under the 2011 CBA, a player could appeal a suspension under the personal conduct policy on its merits, meaning he could challenge the initial determination that there was a violation of the policy and not just the length of suspension. Players who have taken advantage of this appeal include Ezekiel Elliott, Adrian Peterson, Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, which is not a great group to be part of, but the new CBA eliminates that right and confines appeals of these suspensions to challenges to the length of the suspension. In addition, this new standard confines a player's legal arguments on appeal to those which are based on evidentiary record before the neutral arbitrator. Thus, in seeking a reduction of suspension, a player would only be able to rely on the materials introduced into evidence before the arbitrator and could not advance legal arguments as to the fairness of the proceeding, the exclusion of testimony and or documents, or even the existence of arbitrator bias. These were the types of process challenges that were advanced by the NFLPA in the Brady, Peterson, and Elliott cases. Under the new CBA, such arguments are longer to be available, at least during the initial league supervised appeal. So then there's player suspensions need only be supported by credible evidence. One of the most problematic aspects of the new CBA, especially if you're a player, which if you're a player and listening to this, Sup. It is its failure to specify the burden of proof that must be met by the league in order to justify a fine or suspension. The burden of proof refers to an amount of or quality of the evidence that must be offered to establish that a particular claim is true. For example, in criminal cases, the burden of proof is on the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a defendant committed the alleged crime. In civil cases, a plaintiff must prove the case by a preponderance of the evidence, which basically means it is more likely that not the plaintiff's version of the facts is true. For certain types of civil lawsuits, such as those alleging fraud, the burden of proof is clear and convincing evidence. So for the NFL's personal conduct policy disciplinary cases, the new Article 46 is oddly silent as to the burden of proof that applies. It only states the NFL will have the burden of establishing that the player violated the personal conduct policy without indicating the quantum of evidence that must be established to prove a violation. This is in contrast to other sections of the CBA, which refer to a clear preponderance of the evidence in describing the burden of proof that is applicable to other contexts. Though the burden of proof isn't specified in Article 46, I would expect the league to utilize the credible evidence standard from the personal conduct policy, which states even in cases where a player is not charged with a crime or is charged but not convicted, he may still be found to have violated the policy if credible evidence establishes that he engaged in conduct prohibited by his personal conduct policy. So, basically, let's kind of cut it down here. Basically, what happened here in this new CBA is that the Players Association expected a lot of changes in disciplinary actions. There are some changes, but ultimately everything kind of stays the same. The commissioner still gets pretty much the final say. There's some new arbitration rulings and stuff like that. The suspensions kind of get changed as well. But overall, Roger Goodell still has immense power when it comes to suspending players and disciplining players, which is still a big issue, and that's why a lot of players probably voted against this because of this, or nobody even read this section and they were focused on the Game 17 and the other benefits that came into this. But I'm not really sure. But it does sound like that nothing really changed disciplinary-wise, even though a lot of players wanted some change there. But when we come back, we'll do more CBA talk, because I know everybody loves the CBA. We'll talk about the Major League Baseball CBA when we return.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, because of the changes to the baseball season is going to be shortened or changed or moved or postponed or something like that because of the coronavirus. Now, because of this, Major League Baseball has a huge problem on their hands. What do we do with the CBA? How does this affect service time? How does this affect cash flow? How does this change contracts? How does this change like I said, service time? What about the minor leaguers? How are the minor leaguers going to survive during this time of no baseball? Here's a little anecdote here. I was going to work for the local minor league baseball team for my town, and I was going to work as the helping entertainment side of things, running the switcher for the live stream, or running the scoreboard, or the video board, or doing music, something like that. I was going to help with the entertainment side of things, and I was really excited about it. I worked a college game, and it was a lot of fun, and I was really excited about it, but because of this whole thing, I never got to work a game, and now I'm just kind of sitting here. Now, that was not my only source of income. I have 2 other sources of income, so it wasn't really that big of a deal for me, but I'm imagining these minor leaguers where this is their only source of income, and now they kind of have to, they spend basically from January on training for the baseball season to try to make a major league roster, get paid a decent amount of money, but unfortunately they did not accomplish that goal because of the coronavirus. So this is an economic dispute in a $10.7 billion industry. So with the COVID crisis, all but eliminating any chance of a 162-game season, there could be no winners in this deal, only losers. In the interest of cutting losses, each side had to choose its priorities. So the owners in Major League Baseball fretted over cash flow. The players valued service time and were guaranteed they would receive it, both in the event of a partial season in 2020 or if there's no season at all. The final terms of the agreement, as conveyed by sources, reflect the give and take that defines all labor settlements and are expected to be approved by the owners in a conference call on Friday. So, Andrew Miller, Cardinals reliever, member of the MLB Players Association Executive Committee. He said service time was the vital issue for us, and I feel like we got that covered fairly. A generation of players will not be held back due to service time implications resulting from a partial season or an unfortunate event of a canceled season. So basically that means the players were fighting for service time, and what that basically means is service time. MLB is really bad with this, in my opinion. So service time is you have to play a certain amount of time before you get a free agency or before certain incentives jump in. Like, for instance, I know minor league, this happens a lot in the minor leagues. Some teams, this happened with Chris Bryant, this happened with Ronald Acuna. So basically, a player would be in the minor leagues. He's good enough to be called up for opening day, but they don't call him up opening day. They call him up after game 10 or something like that. Because after game 10, that means service time. They won't get enough service time for that whole year to make it a year. So basically, the team, when they call him up, they get a full another year on that guy's contract just because he didn't reach the service time. So I mean, that Chris Bryant tried to appeal that, fight that. Ronald Acuna signed an extension, so I guess he's not fighting that. But it's a big issue in baseball. It's kind of the most jerkish things that baseball organizations do to their players, because you're kind of robbing them of being able to hit free agency sooner. And in baseball, you don't hit free agency. It's like 6 years or something like that. By the time you hit free agency, you're already in your late 20s or early 30s. And yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of that's why baseball players get those huge deals, because once they do get free agency, they try to make bank because they know they might not get another chance at making free agency. So the players agreed to a prorated salaries of the 2020 season is shortened and stand to lose all but $170 million lump sum advance if it is canceled. They also made compromises in the amateur draft, agreeing to changes for not only this year's class, but also next year's, changes that are drawing criticism in the industry, but the alternative, some of the players' side point out, could have been no draft at all in 2020. The two sides had little choice. By the way, I think they changed the draft to only being like 7 rounds or something, or like a very little round. The MLB draft is already like 40 rounds. They're changing it to like 7 or something like that, kind of a shortened draft, which I saw a statistic that means like thousands of players or college players are not going to get drafted this year just because of that, which is crazy. So the two sides had little choice but to reach a deal. Without one, Commissioner Rob Manfred would have needed to officially notify the union he was suspending all player contracts, a decision the league believed was necessary before the scheduled openers on Thursday, but the union was willing to delay more than once. This agreement amounts to a good first step, but before play can resume, much more will be needed resolved, including the deal ensures players will hold final approval on scheduling. The league cannot unilaterally determine how games are played or when. Both sides say they desire to play as many games as possible. The agreement also allows for the regular season to extend into October, providing 31 more possible dates. So I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter that players are okay with playing multiple doubleheaders in a week, maybe as much as 2 doubleheaders every week, which would be crazy for pitchers. I'm sure that would be terrible for pitchers, but that might include a larger roster, maybe expanding the roster to 40 just for this season, so you can have more starting pitchers, so that's not, killing you there. So you have that. So that's a big deal. I know a lot of players are for doing that. They want to play as much as possible because at the end of the day, you're getting paid for every game. The more games you play, the less money you lose from the prorated rated contracts and stuff like that. And also, it's important to these players because if you miss a full season of play, you're missing a full season of your prime, of your contract or stuff like that. You do not want to do that. So that's a big deal. Postseason might be expanded and played, at least in part, at neutral sites. I don't fully understand the expanded postseason thing. I don't know why every league's expanding their postseason now. The NFL just did it. The NBA, I think, was considering doing it, and now the MLB is considering doing it. I understand the money aspect of it, but from a fan's perspective, I don't want more people in the playoffs. We already have enough people in the playoffs. We don't need half of every league making the playoffs. The MLB, they already had like 14 teams making the playoffs. We don't need more than 14, I feel like. More than half the league should not be able to make the playoffs. That's just my opinion. I don't know how any of you feel, but that's my opinion. I don't understand the fight to expand these. I understand that it's for money and stuff like that. I don't understand why you would be okay with that. As a fan, I don't know why you would be okay with that. But, at the end of the day, we don't really have that much say. We can be like, hey, don't do that. And they'll be like, money. And then, we're going to watch it anyways. It's whatever. Transactions will be frozen when the deal becomes official. The union and the league must agree on the date they can resume. Roster sizes are likely to expand, like I mentioned earlier, at least for the start of the season, coming off an abbreviated spring training, the way they did after the players returned from their strike in 1995. So other ideas will also be in play, but settling how pay and service time will work in a shortened or canceled season was the biggest obstacles between the owners and the players. They addressed the worst case scenario of a canceled season only because of the need to account for every contingency. Turning point for the players was when the league agreed to grant service time in the event of a canceled season, allowing players to continue toward free agency or arbitration unimpeded. The number of days a player received in 2019 would be the same number they would receive in 2020. The players also will earn a full year of service in a shortened 20 season, regardless of how many games the schedule includes. So that was an important part for the players to get schedule time. It's important for the owners to not have a strike in an already potentially shortened season. So, but this came at a price that yielded on their full salaries for 2020. Probably a wise decision considering any of their financial demands would have come across as tone deaf with the economy in peril. Their case also might have been weak based upon language empowering the commissioner to withhold salary in a national emergency, which I did not know that was a thing. He can withhold salary if country's in national emergency, which, by the way, we're in a national emergency right now. So, Rob Manfred could completely screw over all of the players. But that's basically the updated CBA. They did it to figure out if we were doing a shortened season or not, which we're going to have to because we already missed an opening day. So, that's interesting. I thought it was interesting to kind of get through that. When we come back, more boring jarble. I'm joking. It's important. Next topic is pressure to get sports back on TV when we return.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
So, as you all know, sports television makes money. People like watching sports. People like you. People like me. We all like watching sports. That's why sports media makes money. That's why sports broadcasts make money, especially in this day and age with cord cutting and people not paying for cable anymore. They're either paying for online services like YouTube TV, Hulu TV, or Sling TV, one of the two, or just straight up just having only Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, just streaming services just in general. So cable subscriptions are at an all-time low at the moment, I'm pretty sure. Ratings are down throughout for everything, even football. I mean, I know the Super Bowl still makes huge numbers, but that's the Super Bowl. It's kind of a cultural event. So television is kind of, I'm not saying television's dying, but kind of the only thing to really watch live on television at this moment in time is sports. And right now we have no sports. So now, to be fair, I've watched a little bit more television than I've had in a long time these past 2 weeks, whether it be Hulu or Netflix or actual TV, cable TV, and that's mostly because there's nothing else to watch. So maybe this is better for all of TV in general. But the big money contracts in cable is sports. That's where the big money is, because sports is something you have to watch live. You can record it if you want. I'm not a big fan of recording it. You can record it if you want. You can watch a recording of a sport, but now with the internet and push notifications, you're going to get spoiled. You're going to get spoiled about what happens in the game. So unless you really care about watching that film and making sure your team does everything correctly, you're not going to watch that if you know what happens. Just saying. Now, there have been plenty of people that rewatch games, and that's a completely different thing. But when a sport, for instance, if a sport happens at 8 o'clock, ends at 11, you didn't watch it, you get a push notification that says blah, 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 won. Are you going to go back and watch it? Unless if you're that into it, and if it was a good game, and you want to rewatch it, and you just want to watch it just to see what happened, or something crazy happened, or like there was a huge comeback, and you just want to see how it all unfolded, I guess I understand that, but 98% of the time, you are not going to rewatch that game. So, what does this have to do with what I'm going to talk about? So, money trouble. There is a lot of pressure behind getting sports back on TV, of course, by fans, as we have nothing else to do with our lives, because everybody's either working from home, or you unfortunately got laid off, or you're furloughed, or something like that. I mean, you're just kind of sitting at home, doing pretty much nothing nothing. I mean, I've been self-quarantining for the past 2 weeks, except for coming to work every weekend. And, I'm kind of getting bored. There's not much to do. So, the specifics of each contract vary by sport and by network, but generally speaking, they contain a provision that allows the networks to recoup money if a great unforeseen set of circumstances causes the cancellation of games. It's like a global pandemic. Just throwing that out there. So, up until about a few weeks ago, the force majeure clause, that's what it's called, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm going to pronounce it that way anyways, was boilerplate language in contracts between TV networks and major sports league. It was just kind of there, just in case. It's just, there's nothing. I mean, nothing like that's going to happen ever. Come on, that's crazy. But if something did happen like that, we're going to put this in the contract just in case. But now everyone in sports media business is talking about it. Lee Burke, sports and TV consultant who advises sports teams and regional sports networks on contracts, said it's the term that is now flying around out there. Force majeure is something that is out of everybody's hands. A natural disaster, a flood, tornado, hurricane, pandemic. It's part of the discussions that are starting to take place on a very tentative basis between the networks and the leagues that I think are starting to pick up steam in the days and weeks to come. In the case of collegiate men's basketball, the clause was already triggered by the cancellation of the NCAA tournament. Those games will not be made up. Turner Broadcasting and CBS pay about $800 million to the NCAA per year to air the tournament, through a contract that will run through 2032. The NCAA revealed Thursday that because of lost revenue, it will pay Division I member schools $225 million this year instead of $600 million that was expected. $50 million of that will come from its reserve fund, with the other $175 million coming from a line of credit that it plans to pay off once it receives $270 million from an event cancellation insurance policy. In pro sports, Turner, ESPN, ABC are not yet demanding the NBA return to the court to finish the season, or else forfeit the $2.6 billion they pay the league to show its games. The same can be said for NBC and the NHL in the U.S., $200 million annually. And for ESPN, Fox, Turner, with Major League Baseball, more than $1.5 billion annually. Opening day was supposed to be this past Thursday. Now in the middle of this global mess, it is not the moment for the networks to enforce force majeure. But the leagues are not without pressure to get back on the field, court, or ice this summer so they can ensure that they get their TV money. Sports are not immune to the country's economic woes, and the easiest way the leagues can weather that storm is to finish, or in baseball's case, start their seasons. Ronnie D. Fort, sports economics and professor at University of Michigan, said it's essential. There won't be any other money stream that's available to them. As soon as they get back on TV, they can start to massage the revenue opportunities that are available to them. If fans can't come to games, then TV is the obvious. So, of course, Rudy Gobert tested positive on March 11th, prompted the NBA to suspend its season immediately. The NCAA tournament, NHL, MLB, PGA Tour all followed after that. Prior to his positive test, the NBA and NHL were prepping to play games with no fans in the stands. Many conference tournaments were making the same preparations for men's and women's college basketball, as was MLB for spring training games. For instance, the ACC tournament, I think on Tuesday, the tournament started. Tuesday, you had people there. Wednesday, you had people there. And then Thursday, it was nobody. They told everybody, don't come. That's basically what it is. So if there was ever going to be a comeback, all we have to look at is how sports shut down. What was the plan at shutdown? The plans was no fans, play the games. And presumably they were saying that it was because the TV money was such that even though they might lose money, having the TV money meant they lost less than if they didn't have the TV money. So in pro baseball, basketball, and hockey, the league strikes deals with major networks for marquee regular season games and postseasons. Each team negotiates its own regional TV deal to carry most of its regular season contests. The NBA and NHL have completed most of their regular seasons. The NHL teams had 11 or 12 games left. NBA teams had 15 to 19. The NBA, for instance, has said they'd be willing to play through August for their playoffs. They've gotten the bulk of their regular season games in. They can play a full playoff schedule. Then there's not that much of an issue financially or all concerned. Baseball, different boat. Of course, baseball hasn't started their season. They get to finish spring training, and on top of that, they were scheduled to have, their season. Regional TV deals are lucrative in baseball, worth as much as $200 million per year to the Los Angeles Dodgers, between $20 to $60 million annually to most teams. So the Giants, the Angels in baseball, Cavaliers in the NBA. From a regional standpoint, networks are expecting a minimum number of live games, and those games are missing. They're going to try to obtain compensation for those games. Could be compensation, it could be additional rights, it could be an extension of a term on an agreement, but certainly as a regional sports network, you're more exposed. In the main thing you offer up is the game itself as far as the preseason or postseason. If you cancel a season, then you cancel the playoffs, and you're going to take a huge financial hit, and it's not a choice any league is going to make. They're going to do everything possible to save the season. So the bottom line is, we look at this and we're like, oh no, there's no sports, but there is a huge economic issue here, because with no sports, you're losing out on these TV money, and most of these leagues rely on TV money. The NCAA, for instance, relies on that TV money a lot, especially different universities and their athletic programs. They rely on that TV money. The conferences rely on that TV money, which we'll discuss. We'll discuss the NCAA in the next segment, not their financial woes, but we'll discuss them in the next segment as we talk about they voted on seniors, whether they get an extra year of eligibility. Did they do the right thing, or did we make a mistake here? When we return.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
It's been a topic of discussion here in the NCAA. It's been a topic of discussion in college sports in general, as spring sports were completely canceled thanks to the coronavirus, thanks to this global pandemic here. All spring sports were canceled. Softball canceled. NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness canceled. Baseball canceled. Track and field canceled. All of these spring sports were completely canceled. There was hope that they would just postpone the season. They'll play later or go straight into the College World Series or stuff like that. But no, straight up canceled, and they canceled all the spring sports for the rest of the academic year. So we have to wait until the fall to see if college sports return, and that brought up a huge issue. What about eligibility? Because eligibility is a huge thing in college athletics, as everybody knows. You get 4 years. You can get redshirted, of course, and get a 5th year of eligibility, but you get 4 years and then you're done. You get kicked out, unless circumstances come along, just like this one. So this is kind of a huge topic in the NCAA and collegiate sports in general. I've discussed it before. I think the right choice would be to give the seniors an extra year of eligibility, because a lot of them are not going to play in the majors. A lot of them are not going to play in the NBA. A lot of them are not going to play in the MLB or stuff like that. A lot of them are not going to be professional athletes. So you don't want your senior year to kind of get destroyed by something that's completely out of your control. So now we come to this. The NCAA, they need to make a decision, and they need to make the right one, I feel like. Basketball is a little sketchy, in my opinion. Basketball is just a tad bit sketchy because they already played a full season. You're just missing out on the postseason, which that does suck, but at least you played a full season. You might not get the exact closure you were looking for, but you at least played your final season for your respective college. Baseball, they just started their season. They played maybe 10 to 15 games already. Softball, they played I don't know, softball plays a lot of games. I didn't realize how much games softball played, by the way. So I'm a graduate from Clemson. Clemson just got a new softball team this past spring, which unfortunately got cut short because, the thing we're talking about. I didn't realize how many freaking games softball teams play. They played like 5 games in like one day, I'm pretty sure. It's crazy. Anyways, so yeah, they were just beginning their seasons. They were ramping up. They started conference play, and they were looking to be going to the College World Series and stuff like that. Their season got cut short. So what is the NCAA going to do about it? So this article by Nicole Auerbach, which I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not positively sure. Great follow on Twitter, by the way. She writes great stuff. So by the time night fell on March 12th, college sports, as we always known them, had ground to a halt. The dominoes had begun to fall early that morning as men's basketball conference tournaments were canceled one by one. The rest happened at once, a watershed moment in NCAA history as the national governing body canceled the remainder of its winter and spring championship events in one fell swoop. In an instant, thousands of athletes in their final season of eligibility faced an abrupt and untimely end to their college careers. On March 13th, the Council Coordination Committee for NCAA Division I agreed that it will be appropriate to grant relief for the use of a season of competition for student athletes who have participated in spring sports. According to a document circulated to member schools, the committee said it would address specific issues tied to scholarship limitations and financial aid at a later date. The later date is now here. On Monday, the Division I Council will vote on this particular eligibility issue. The council is made up of athletic directors, conference commissioners, faculty athletic reps, senior women's administrators, current student athletes, with voting-weighted power toward the Power 5 leagues. But the vote is much more complicated than many have made it out to be so far, despite the Coordination Committee's initial language and the fact that Division II ruled last week to grant its spring sport athletes an additional season of eligibility. Making a similar decision across Division I would be significantly more expensive, which makes it significantly more complex. Most high-level administrators support granting Division I spring sport athletes the opportunity to play in 2021, according to conversations with various athletic directors and conference commissioners this week. But they aren't sure about the mechanics of actually making it happen and committing to it financially while so much remains uncertain and the country appears to be heading into a recession. On Thursday, the NCAA reported that it would distribute just $225 million, which we discussed in the last segment, of what was supposed to be $600 million to its Division I schools. That's a significant hit for many athletic departments. State schools are expected to take another significant hit in terms of appropriations for higher education, uncertainty regarding revenue from donations, endowments, television contracts, ticket sales, as athletic administrators grapple with the possibility of football season being canceled as well, shortened or adjusted in some form. Can these same athletic departments afford to dole out financial aid for spring sport athletes for another year? Giving an additional season of eligibility to seniors on spring sports teams could cost public schools in the Power 5 conference anywhere from $500,000 to $900,000, according to a USA Today analysis. This isn't just the rich schools choosing not to spend money on something, one high-level Division I administrator said Friday. This one is real. It does come down to money. It's also true for schools that don't have big-time football as revenue producers. Some FCS schools that offer a wide range of spring sports could be on the hook for up to $400,000, USA Today found. The uncertainty around higher education in general is enough to make administrators nervous. Will universities see decreased enrollment and deferments this fall? Will they even be able to open their campuses in time for the fall semester to start? These are questions beyond athletics that need to be answered, issues of institutional support. Students have been through a lot, so trying to provide them an opportunity to be as whole as they can with regards to their competition opportunities, I think is something that they are generally supportive of. Sunbelt Commissioner Keith Gill said Thursday, adding that his league hadn't finalized its stance on the issue just yet. Financially, we're all trying to figure out what this all looks like. There will be some hard decisions that we'll have to make. In the perfect world, MAC Commissioner John Steinbrecher said it'd be easy. Give all athletes impacted 4 full seasons of competition. But there are operational questions that raise new financial issues. If you're expanding the roster, do you have enough lockers in your locker room for all of them? Do you need to hire more athletic trainers, academic advisors, or nutritionists? Do you need to hire more... sorry, I already read that part. Those are all the key logistical questions, in addition to the big one, increasing the final financial aid commitment. As a business decision, you go, wow, Steinbrecher said on the phone Friday, is there a way you can make it expense neutral? It'd be a lot of money to commit to spring sport athlete scholarships when everyone's taking incredible hits. The waiver that D1 Council is looking at on Monday already exists for individual athletes to apply for in circumstances termed to be extenuating. If granted, it requires that the athletic department provide the same level of aid to that athlete for his or her extra year of eligibility. It's the same sort of sentiment that exists, broadly speaking, when an athlete signs with a school and has a multi-year scholarship. The level of aid stays the same for each athlete each year, so you can't get your scholarship slashed just because you performed poorly or got hurt. So we'll call this Option A. Option A would grant all schools the ability to self-apply the waiver for all 2020 spring athletes. That's expensive, obviously. But there's option B, which would provide institutions with maximum flexibility. The NCAA could allow individual schools to determine how much, if any, they are willing to provide for each spring athlete in terms of aid for an additional year. And option B, a school might tell one scholarship track athlete could bring her back for her final season, but only pay for room and board. Another track athlete might get offered a quarter of a grant instead of a half a grant, so on and so forth. So my thing is about that part, option B, is that more than likely, most of these athletes are close to graduating, so they probably don't have to take many classes, or they graduated, or they were planning on graduating this spring. So I'm not sure if they would have to go into grad school, or they can just not go to school and still be part of the team, something like that. That's another thing that needs to be interested. But this kind of ties in everything we've talked about today. The financial issues with the NCAA, the financial issues because of TV contracts is affecting the athletes specifically. Basically, this pandemic sucks. I hate it. I want sports back, but more importantly, I want everyone to get their fair shake at at competition and completing all 4 years of their eligibility, because they deserve it. You know, I know if I was in their shoes, I would be gutted right now. So I want them to have their full opportunity to do what they want to do. So there you have it. That's what the NCAA says. They're voting on it tomorrow, so we'll find out for the Tuesday show, maybe. But when we return, we're going to talk about our random sport of the day, which is Kabaddi. Kabaddi, one of the two, when we return.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
I'm telling y'all, this is a weird sport. So, if you look up this sport, it's Kabaddi. It's Kabaddy. Alright, so I don't know if it's Kabaddi or Kabaddi. I don't know which one it is. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. This is not an Olympic sport, I don't think. But if you watch it, if you watch a little bit of it, it's basically very intense tag. Now, there's, of course, different rules to it, and I'll read some of the rules out to you here. But if you watch it, it just looks like very intense game of tag. So just keep that in mind, especially if you go look it up and you go, look what is Kabaddi? What are we talking about here? It is very intense tag. Just remember that. Okay, so let's get into it. Kabaddi, whatever. We're going to call it Kabaddi because that's more fun to say, to be honest. Contact team sport, native to Indian subcontinent. Played between two teams of 7 players each. The objective of the game is for the single player on offense, referred to as a raider, to run into opposing team's half of the court, tag out as many defenders as possible, return to their own half of the court, all without being tackled by the defenders. And in a single breath. Does that mean they have to hold their breath? What? Points are scored, tagged by the raider, while the opposing team earns a point for stopping the raider. Players are taken out of the game if they are tagged or tackled, but they are brought back in for each point scored by their team from a tag or tackle. It is popular in South Asia and other surrounding Asian countries, although accounts of Kabaddi appear in the histories of ancient India. The game was popularized as a competitive sport in the 20th century. It is the national sport of Bangladesh. Shout out to Bangladesh. It is the state game of the Indian states of Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Haryana, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, Jesus, I'm sorry, Odisha, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and Uttar Pradesh? No, man, I butchered all of that. I'm sorry if you are of Indian descent or anything like that. I apologize very much. There are 2 major disciplines of Kabaddi, so-called Punjabi Kabaddi, which that is just really fun to say, also referred to as circle style, comprises of traditional forms of the sport that are played on a circular field outdoors, while the standard style, played on a rectangular court indoors, is a discipline played in major professional leagues and international competitions such as the Asian Games. The game is known by numerous names in different parts of South Asia, such as Kabaddi or Shed Ugudu. Oh, God. It could be also Hadudu. Oh, Jesus. All right, we're done trying to read these names. So the history of the game, although unverified, theories from religious believers state that Kabaddi originated from either the Vedic period of ancient India or the Sistan region of present-day Iran. The game was said to have been popular among the Yadava people, and Abhang of Tukaram stated that the god Krishna played the game in his youth, while Mahabharata contains an account of Arjuna being able to sneak into hostiles area, also take out enemies unscathed, which they are claiming that parallels the gameplay of Kabaddi. There are accounts of Gautama Buddha having played the game recreationally, so there you go. There's a lot of history there. Despite these conflicting claims, India has been credited with having helped to popularize Kabaddi as a competitive sport, with the first organized competitions occurring in 1920s, their introduction to the program in the Indian Olympic Games in 1938, the establishment of the All India Kabaddi Federation in 1950, and it played as a demonstration sport at the inaugural 1951 Asian Games in New Delhi. These developments helped to formalize the sport, which had traditionally been played in villages for legitimate international competition. After being demonstrated again in the 1982 Asian Games in Delhi, Kabaddi was added to the Asian Games program beginning in 1990. So there you go. I mean, that's good for them. I mean, you know, it's always great to see great sports getting their due, you know. So there are variations, like we mentioned. There's standard style in the international team version of Kabaddi. 2 teams of 7 members, each occupy opposite halves of a court of 10 by 13 meters, which is 33 feet by 43 feet. In case of men, an 8 by 12 meters, 26 feet to 39 feet in case of women. Each has 5 supplementary players held in reserve, in other words, for substitution. The game is played with 20-minute halves with a 5-minute half break in which teams exchange sides. During each play, known as a raid, a player from the attacking side, known as the raider, runs into the opposite team's side of the court, attempts to tag as many of the 7 defending players as possible. For a raid to be eligible for points, the raider must cross the line into the defending team's territory and then return to their half of the field without being tackled. If an attacker touches a defender and hasn't yet reached the line, they don't need to reach the line to score points and may return to their half of the court. While raiding, the raider must loudly chant Kabaddi, confirming to referees that their raid is done on a single breath without inhaling. A 30-second limit is also enforced on each raid. So yes, they have to hold their breath for each raid. So so basically you're the attacker. I'm showing this physically for some reason, even though you can't see me, but whatever, it happens. So you're on the side of the court, then you got to go you just got to hold your breath, or you got to say Kabaddi, one of the two, and then you got to go on the raid and attack as many people as you can without getting tackled, and then make it back to your half of the court. That is interesting. This is so interesting. A point is scored for each defender tagged. If the raider steps beyond the bonus line marked in the defending team's territory, they earn an additional point, known as a bonus point. If the raider is successfully stopped, tackled, the opposing team earns a point instead. All players tagged are taken out of the game, but one is revived for each point a team scores from a subsequent tag or tackle. Bonus points do not revive players. Players who step out of the boundary are out. A raid where no points are scored by the raider is referred to as an empty raid. By contrast, a play where the raider scores 3 or more points is referred to as a super raid. God, this is great. If a team gets all 7 players on the opposing team out at once, all out, they earn 2 additional points and the players are placed back in the game. So additional rules are used in Pro Kabaddi League. If a team has 2 empty raids in a row, the next raider must score a point because the next raid is a do-or-die raid. In this raid, the player must either get a point or be out. If the raider does not get a point, then the opposite team will get a point and the raider will be declared out. Additionally, when fewer than 4 players left on the field, tackles are worth 2 points, which is called a super tackle. We need super tackles in the NFL. Just saying. So circle style, which let's see, 1 player is revived against 1 player of the opposite team who is out. The game is played over 40 minutes with 5-minute breaks between halves. There are 7 players on each side, and the team that outs all the players on the opponent's side scores 4 extra points. In Gamine style, 7 players play on each side, and a player put out has to remain out until all his team members are out, which is basically like dodgeball kind of, except for tag. So yeah, so there's a Kabaddi World Cup. There was one in 2019. It was held in April 2019 in Malacca, Malaysia. It was the largest World Cup in Kabaddi history, consisting of 32 men team and 24 female teams. It's also part of the Asian Games. There's a Pro Kabaddi League established in 2014. League modeled its business upon the Indian Premier League of 2020 cricket, with a large focus on marketing, the backing of local broadcaster Star Sports, and changes to the sports rules in its presentation, make it more suitable for a television audience. You have the Super Kabaddi League. They just love super, apparently. So it's a popular sport in India, of course. I don't see it getting popular over here in the States, but it's an interesting sport. Check it out on YouTube. I've seen a couple clips of it. It's very confusing at first, but now that I've read off the rules to you, if you go look at it, you can get a better understanding of it, I guess. So yeah, there you have it. So that is this episode. It's a little on the heavy side of reading a bunch of CBA stuff and TV contracts and stuff like that. Sorry, but there's no sports. Not sure if you know that. There's nothing really to talk about. So yeah. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you like this podcast, rate, and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Strickland_Josh. You can follow GSMC Sports at GSMC_Sports on Twitter as well. Thank you for listening, everybody. I'll see you on Tuesday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.